So in this video, I'm going to show you a fun improv braided quilt block technique. There's no set finish size for this block and there's no measuring of the pieces. It's just a fun, scrappy quilt block technique that you can use in lots of different projects.
Hi, I'm Kristen. So I'm in the middle of making a scrappy pieced quilt back. Basically, I made an isosceles triangle quilt top, which I'll show you in probably a future video. But I was left with all sorts of funny shaped scraps because I'm cutting triangles. I was using my AccuQuilt cutter. Let me just put this down, sorry. And so I ended up with like little bits like this and various different shapes. Anyway, and I decided I just wanted to do a random improv kind of pieced quilt back. So I've kind of gravitated towards, if you've seen any of my crumb quilting videos before, you kind of start with small pieces and build up. And this is kind of a variation of that, except with maybe slightly larger pieces and just using a slightly repeated pattern for it. So for example, so there are braided quilt blocks that you might have seen. This is like that, but it's more, we're not measuring pieces and it's just random. So obviously that's not it in the middle, but the four pieces that are the border of this are what I'm talking about. It's kind of like you're using, so I started with some crumbs in the middle and then added going up and it becomes a braid, and it's kind of random which direction it ends up going in, depending. I think that one was probably done that way, you know, and I'll show you some other examples, and I'll show you also, I took some photos so I could show you kind of how it builds up, because I think some folk have said some of the crumb quilting videos go a bit fast. So I'm going to try and make it clearer for this one, but it is a kind of intuitive kind of thing. You just sort of get into the rhythm of it and you do it. So there's no hard and fast rules. So I'm going to show you a bit of my process, kind of the mess and chaos of how I actually work when I'm doing this. And I'll show you also how the blocks come together.
So I start with a small crumb of fabric, so it can be any size. That's just a little triangle, and then I add another piece to it. So right sides together, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and we don't worry if one piece is a little bit longer. So you end up with something like this. You press it in between each time and then trim it down so that it's got straight sides, straight-ish, you know. Then add another piece to the other side. So you're crossing the two seams you just made at the top of that triangle there. And then I also, you know, once I've repeated that, if I'm getting a sort of short end on the corner there, then I'll add a piece there. So it kind of adds an extra little braid on the end, if you will. And then you just continue. So you continue adding one piece to either side as you go along, right sides to right sides, and trimming. So you're just making straight sides as you go along, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And obviously the larger the pieces you use, the larger the block's going to be, or you can just keep going and going. And as you get, if you get a short side, you can just keep on adding these extra pieces on the end, on the corner where I've done that there. And so I've done some of these that are quite fat and they become larger blocks, and some that are quite a lot skinnier. I'll show you a few more examples later on in the video. But you just keep on adding a piece, a piece, a piece. And we don't stress too much when it's, you know, ends up short on the end, because you can always just add this secondary braid on the corner. It always seems to happen to me. I think the piece is long enough and then I end up adding some, but I kind of like the look of that. So that's fine with me. And I'm going to show you another example where I didn't start with necessarily a triangle. I started with just 2 crumbs and just added some other bits. And all I'm doing is adding small pieces of fabric, trimming to a straight edge, and then adding another piece. And so for this one, I'm almost kind of crumb piecing it until it is a triangle, and then start the braid, the proper braid, where you're kind of going left side, right side, or whichever side you start with. It doesn't matter which side you start with, to build that up further. So just keep on going until basically I've run out of pieces or I want to stop. And hopefully you can see how that's building up. So it becomes easier once you get that. So you can just start with a triangle like I did on the first one. But once you get to a shape that's somewhat triangular-like, then, and it doesn't matter if it veers off to the left or the right as you're trimming. That's kind of the fun of figuring out what it's going to end up looking like. And then once you've got a big enough piece, just trim it down to whatever size you want it to be for what you're going to use it for. So I'm going to show you a few more examples, so don't worry about that.
So I start by chain piecing in the same way that I would with a crumb quilt block. So some of the bits are quite small and then they grow from there. And I end up often using random strips that I've got, and then with a bunch of pieces on it, I have to snip them apart. So and then I have my iron over here and my cutting mat here. So it's kind of a rotational thing. So here's one that started with a little funky crumb center, and then it turned into a braid going one way and then the other. And I think I'm ready to trim that down. So I want it to be long and narrow for what I'm gonna put it next to another block similar to this. So I'm going to trim that down. So all I'm gonna do is go straight, and then kind of try and straighten up the top. And I'm not 100% concerned whether or not the whole thing is like an equal rectangle, because I'm gonna put it next to something else that can then be trimmed down and added to or whatever.
So one way I've used these long narrow strips, if you just keep going with them, is to make a really long strip and use it in a quilt backing, similar to this one, when I didn't have enough backing fabric. So I used some strips to kind of make it bigger. I'm probably going to have another video about a whole bunch of different ways to do quilt backing. So I'll talk a bit more about this technique in that video.
So there we go. There is my little, what's going to be like a border piece for a block probably. And so I'm going to set that aside until I want to use it. And then I've got other bits that are going to be much larger. So this will probably turn into more of a block kind of a braid, which could be added to other pieces that I've crumb pieced in different ways or whatever. So this one was turning into a really skinny braid. Can you see that in the middle? And I didn't know exactly where I was going to use it for. So I found some other strips and added one. I must have added this one first and then added across and then down here, you know, and so just widened it. So you can do that too. So it's just kind of a rhythm to get into with the scraps. It's not a set thing. And I'm just looking for a piece that's long enough. It's going to be this. I've got a lot of these pink strips from like an eBay haul one time of strips, I think. And like, it's a baby pink that I think that was part of what made me want to do the scrappy back, because I was like, I can't think when I'm going to really use this color a whole lot again. I was drawn to it for the quilt top, which is like this yellow and pink and creamy colors. So I figure I better use up these scraps in the backing. And then once I've got this strip going, I tend to find something else that can be added to it. This one, just with the way the strips have gone, has gone a bit wonky here. So I'm going to add a strip here, and then I can trim it this way, and then I could add something else here and here, and the braid will kind of keep going above this bit. So this piece is like two bits of braid. So there's one here, and then there's one here that I just joined together. No reason why, I just did it. And then I can add to it around and make it a bigger block. I can make it white. Like, this is gonna be a random back, like a very random scrappy back, but I'm hoping because it's only a set number of colors, it's not gonna look too nutso, but we'll see, it might. I'll show you one more example. So this isn't trimmed down yet because I don't know what I'm gonna add to it, but basically I've got a collection of kind of flying geese and other things in a couple strips, and then I added a braided strip on this side. Yes, I know it's got a wonky side there. I might trim that down, or I might add something else to it. I don't know. But anyway, so I've got various pieces like that going in to the backing. This is another one that's not quite finished. So this was a crumb and then a braid, and then I decided to start sort of piecing it more into a triangle for that one. So sorry, the braid is this way. the braid is, you can kind of see that there was a braid going on here, but I just didn't take it very far because it started looking, there's triangles on the front, so that's kind of an echo of that. And there's a few other bits that aren't so much the braids. So anyway, that's the idea. I hope it's given you some inspiration. I know it's not a finished complete block, so if you want to see how the braids turn out and how I've used them in the quilt bag, then be sure to watch the video that I do on my isosceles triangle quilt, because this is what's going to go in the back. So I hope to see you then. I hope you like this video and it's given you some inspiration and not confused you too much. If you like videos like this, please do subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought. Thanks so much for spending time with me.